situation in India as to the development of the flexi staffing market is a market with a huge potential. I think that's the first emphasis I would put, a huge potential. And if you look at all the companies, the international companies coming in, being present here, they all see this as a good market. Having said that, it's a market with challenges. It's a multi-challenge market. You have the challenge of not having proper regulation yet. There's the challenge of having a huge informal, unorganized workforce, which we can do nothing with. We only employ organized workforce. There's a challenge that there is a need for continuous up and reskilling. You see the value chain going higher up. There's more functions in the higher added value chain, and not enough skilled people. While on the other hand, India has a huge demographic surplus and a huge potential young population. So if we get that right here, right regulation, right level of skills, right competitive arena, infrastructure, I think we can develop our business, but not only our business, the Indian economy very rapidly. We are playing an important role in the labor market elsewhere, in India too, but elsewhere too. And I think what we see now, what ISF has done in the 3 years of their existence, they're only there for 3 years. They have already published reports, data, they have created a network, they have 40 members in. So they are becoming a voice to listen to when they talk about the flexi market, flexi staffing market. And they will put forward, as they did this morning, their request, a request for better infrastructure, better regulation, more upskilling. And I think the government really, and I hope they will, and there were a lot of government officials present today, they will react and they will start to take into account the positive aspects flexi staffing can add to the labor market. More competitiveness, more growth, more jobs. Let's explain briefly what flexi staffing is. Flexi staffing is a working arrangement where there are 3 parties. There's us, who bring together demand and supply of labor, and we employ the flexi staff employee. Then there's the client. He gives supervision to the work the flexi staffer does. He's responsible for a safe working environment. We're responsible for wages. The client is responsible for a safe working environment. The client pays us a fee. We pay wages to the worker. A flexi worker can work full-time, he can work part-time. If we look at the rest of the world, we see an equal division of flexi staffers, men and women, male and female. So we see that they work full-time, part-time. We see that they work in lower functions, mid functions and high-level functions. We see that they work in sectors from automotive to IT. So we are really cross-sectoral, cross-skills. We supply flexibility. That's what we do. And companies that put in place a flexible workforce strategy, you have to think about it. You really have to think as a company about your strategy, because companies that put in place those strategies will survive longer, will be more competitive, will have higher earnings and profit than companies that don't. There's research to prove that. Flexibility is needed everywhere, from the lower level to the C-suite level. So companies and its specialization we see elsewhere. We can provide flexibility at all levels. Of course, if you provide flexibility at boardroom, headhunting, you're very specialized, but it's possible. So what you see in countries where, and I think we already see that here in India, where agency work, as we call it in Europe, flexi staffing, is a bit more developed. It has been around over 50 years in the US, in Europe. You see a lot of specialized niche companies, boutique companies. They work for IT, they work for engineers, they work for maybe even divers or C-suite. you also see large players who also all do these kind of niches. What we do see is the common denominator, it's a people's business. It's matching one-on-one. Every time you match one person to one job and you go for the best match. Actually, I have to say about image and acceptance, it's not only India. Also in other countries, there is still a battle to fight. The image of this industry, because it's so young, because it's cross-sectoral, because it's non-traditional, because the employment is non-traditional, we have to fight a lot of misperceptions. We have to give a lot of information why it is actually needed in a modern economy that is very competitive and volatile. And I think together with ISF, CIETT can work on fighting these misperceptions. What you need is good data, facts, figures. But what you also need is faces. Faces of people that have worked as temps and have moved on to other functions. The good stories, the positive stories, the facts, the figures, the faces. On a global level, we are regulated by an ILO convention. The ILO is the International Labour Organization in Geneva. It takes care of things like preventing child abuse in work. It also takes care of a special convention for the private employment agencies, and it sets a framework what proper regulation for this sector need. And one of the things I always say is we are such a young sector, we are probably one of the only sectors that are crying out loud to the regulators to say, give us proper regulation in order to develop. We want to be decent employers to our employees. We don't want to compete with those criminals, which we often have to do these days. So ILO has set the framework, and now we are asking all countries to put in place that regulatory framework, which will help us develop, but more important, which will help the labor market in those countries develop properly.